All right, so hello everyone. Welcome to Move AI's NEMT summer webinar series. And yes, it is still summer. Summer actually ends on the 22nd, which is kind of strange. It's happening pretty soon. But my name is Leanne. I'm the marketing manager for Move AI, and we're joined here today with Chris Kelly of WMK Law Group. Chris, would you like to give a quick introduction?
Sure. A healthcare attorney. I've been doing nothing but mobile health related work for about 25 years. I always tell folks I'd rather know a lot about one thing than a little about a lot of things. So mobile healthcare is kind of it for me, and I'm good with that. I love the people I work with and work for. So I feel very fortunate to have been in this industry for as long as I have.
Very nice. And you've also been having a lot of conversations about compliance and fraud, waste, and abuse recently, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's to see how much it's become on the radar when years ago it just wasn't.
Yes, yes. So we're excited to jump in. Before we get started, just a quick little intro about Move AI. Move AI is an AI-powered NEMT platform transforming how NEMT trips are planned, assigned, and delivered. We started by helping transportation providers improve their operations using AI-powered technology to generate smarter, more efficient driver schedules in seconds and helping create workarounds as issues arise during trips. And then now we are extending our AI technology to assist brokers in reducing their manual processes when assigning trips. So with our new trip distribution platform, we're actually partnering with brokers to intelligently match trips to GPs based on performance and priorities. And these can be accepted or rejected. Overall benefits for each may vary, but ultimately it leads to reduced costs, less operational friction, and gaining more results. TP solution, many have reported doing more with less and increasing revenue and savings and meeting those performance metrics, which is really important for securing those contracts and having consistent trips, because that's what we're here for, and also to help move the NEMT needle forward so that we're making sure that folks are arriving to their appointments on time. So if anybody is interested in learning more, please feel free to scan that QR code on the screen. We are also going to send a follow-up email where everybody will have an opportunity to book a demo. And that is it for Move AI. Now we'll just kind of move into some housekeeping. If anyone has questions during the call, please add it to the Q&A section. This is only a 30-minute conversation, so we kindly ask that you keep your questions clear and concise so that Chris can get to all of them in a timely manner. And you'll also receive a recording of this call afterwards, so you can always play it back in case you miss anything. All righty. So Chris, before we jump in, I am just going to do a quick poll here and to just kind of get a sense of the room. So the question is, what confuses you most about NEMT audits or investigations? And I will say everything. Mine is all of the above. What triggers them, who conducts them, what documentation is, required and how to respond. We actually did do a webinar with NEMTAC actually in June on FWA, and it was really great to kind of get that insight as to what is happening because there's just so much information out there. So, all right, so we'll give that about 10 more seconds. And all right. And so I think we are good. So, Chris, let's see who shares my sentiment. It seems 50% of our participants share my sentiment, all of the above. And so we are going to jump right into that and basically get an understanding and get these questions answered. So, Chris, I'm really glad we're actually having this conversation. Um, So, Chris, because like I've been saying, and I spoke about this too with you, is that there has been a lot of discussion around compliance and enforcement action in NEMT right now. But I feel like there's still just not a lot of clarity, right? And so I'm grateful that you're here to kind of break that down. So let's just start with the basics. In the simplest terms, what's happening in the NEMT landscape right now when it comes to regulations and audits?
I think we're seeing more investigations, more random or data driven audits than we've ever seen in the past. I think some of that is because um, the OIG, Office of Inspector General, or the Medicaid fraud control units have the ability now to mine data. I've seen social media posts from these agencies touting their ability to mine data and turn that into active investigations. So that's something that in the past they just didn't have. Honestly, didn't have any real interest in. I'll talk more about why the interest is evolving in a few minutes, I'm sure. But it's just a new brave new world. They're able to do things they've never been able to do in the past, and they're doing them.
And is that because technology is evolving and they're integrating that into their own systems?
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. No doubt about it. Some states seem to be more active than others. Certainly think in New York, we've seen a flurry of activity in the last year. I think I made some notes. I think it was over 50 companies that received cease and desist letters from the state attorney general's office saying, basically, we know what you're up to and you need to stop or you're going to jail. And I think they've recovered over $10 million from just NEMT providers and sent, I think at last count, it was over a dozen to prison. So it's real. They're very active, and it's not a joke. They're not playing around.
So speaking of New York, you're absolutely right. As of like just June, like you said, 50 companies were accused of defrauding Medicaid. And it seems like they're not done. They're still going to continue those investigations in New York. But do you see other jurisdictions kind of following the lead that's happening in New York? And like what exactly, I know you had mentioned technology, but what are the triggers and what are they seeing, the things that are actually driving this wave of increased enforcement?
Um, yeah, a couple of different things there. A couple of different questions, really. The driving force is the Office of Inspector General. Um, a lot of folks don't understand that the state's Medicaid fraud control units actually get audited themselves. So the OIG is the Office of Inspector General of the Department of Health and Human Services. So that's on the federal, not the state side. And they're in charge of protecting the federal money. And Medicaid is in large part funded by the feds on the federal level, and they take the stance that, look, if you're not protecting our money, we're not going to give it to you anymore. So the OIG actually monitors and audits the Medicaid fraud control units on the state level, and if they're not active, they get a bad report and they get told to do better. So it's not just that things have changed in the industry. There is a driving force pushing the Medicaid fraud control units to do more active investigations and audits and to recover money because it protects their office. It protects the state fund when it comes to Medicaid. So there's a lot at stake for them. And because of that, they keep pushing. And I think, and this is just something that I've seen over and over again in my 25 years, if a OIG or a Medicaid fraud control unit or an office of Attorney General's office gets a successful outcome in an investigation, it creates a roadmap of sorts. And where they may not have known what rocks to kick over before an initial investigation of a certain type of scheme or industry. Once they go through the learning curve of doing some initial investigations, they find exactly where the weak spots are. They find exactly what rocks they need to kick over in the next investigation. And that roadmap crosses state boundaries. In other words, these folks talk, right? States aren't in silos. Um, States are encouraged to share notes, to share tools, to share investigative resources and tactics. And they do. So when you see something like what we saw in New York, um, Massachusetts a few years ago was hit by the feds for a very large NEMT overpayment. And the feds basically said, we want our half of that money back, right? You, state, didn't protect the funds. We want our money back. If you can get it back from the NEMT providers themselves, good luck doing that. In the meantime, give us back, I think it was around $14 million. So the states are more active because they have to be. They have to protect that money. They don't want to have to pay the feds back if they come across a failure to protect the trust fund. So I think that's a large part of the reason we see specifically in the NEMT industry these investigations and they're looking at the same things over and over again is because they've created that roadmap now. They know exactly where the weak spots are and what to look at. And I guess we need to take a pause and kind of look at what those weak spots are. Because again, we're seeing them in every case from across the country. When these press releases come out, they're alleging the same stuff: inflated mileage, tolls that didn't exist that got added to an invoice. Of course, the probably the biggest one, phantom trips that just didn't take place. Um, Paying for referrals, that's becoming more and more of an issue. The anti-kickback statute makes what in any other industry would be just good business. Right? I'm going to give you $100 gift card for your referral. I'm going to take you out to lunch for referring me that customer. That's just kind of how normal business is conducted. In healthcare, we don't want decisions made based on who gives the best gift, i.e., kickback. We want decisions based on who provides the best service. So anytime you're getting paid by federal or state dollars, there's going to be strings attached to that. And that main string, when it comes to healthcare and NEMT specifically, is don't pay for referrals, right? So they're on to that one. And we've seen time and time again that they look for that. And when it comes to those main issues, inflated mileage, tolls, phantom trips, proof isn't a problem for them. They've got Google Maps, right? They can verify mileage. They can verify routes and see if there was a toll paid. They can look at your records and see what you're actually paying. And some folks have got nailed for just honestly doing stuff that they really weren't thinking through clearly. For example, listing a destination that at the time the trip supposedly took place was closed, right? The OIG knows, again, where to look, and they're finding things like that. So when it comes to phantom trips, increased mileage, they can prove, right? It's not just an allegation. They can do their digging and they can prove exactly what hasn't been done.
Wow, that's yeah, a lot of great points there. I just want to kind of go back to what you had said about one of the consequences, where they're giving cease and desists, and I've noticed that is actually the consequences seem to vary. Is it that they're starting off with cease and desist because they're trying to prevent that from happening, and then those who are getting fined or, lawsuits are coming up against those NEMT companies? Is that the way of the MFCUs? Is that right? MFCUs? Yeah. Is
Yeah,
that the way?
Medicaid Fraud Control Unit.
Yes. Is that their way of recouping those dollars that the federal oversight bodies are trying to say, hey, states, we need that money back?
Well, I think the cease and desist letters are intended for the smaller offenders, right?
Okay.
We know you're doing stuff that you shouldn't be, but right now we're so busy that maybe it doesn't justify our time for a full-on investigation. Just cut it out, right? Stop trying to take money from the Medicaid program that you're not entitled to. When they find a pattern or identify through data crunching a significant pattern, they're going to investigate that and go after the providers. When it comes to Medicaid fraud, it's one of these things attorneys find interesting that probably nobody else does. On the federal level, almost all enforcement actions are civil. They just want their money back. And the dollars get huge. On the Medicaid side, on the state side, it's amazing how many of the actions are criminal versus civil. They rarely go after civil. And I've got, excuse me for looking away, but I've got some notes from last year's Medicaid Fraud Control Unit annual report to Congress. When it came to NEMT providers and criminal convictions, they had 13. When it came to civil enforcement actions, they only had 5. And when you're looking at the open cases left at the end of 24, so what they're focusing on or what they're still investigating during 2025, there were 262 open criminal investigations and only 24 civil. So that tells you they're not looking to just get money back. They're looking to give people jail time, right? They want to make a point, and they do that by not just saying slap on the wrist and hey, shame on you and give us our money back. They want to make examples out of folks. They do that by criminal prosecution. Now, don't get me wrong, they still get their money back, right? Restitution is part of the criminal process, but they're not going to settle for that, especially when they think there's intent. If they believe that you intentionally are seeking payments that you know you're not entitled to, they're going to make an example out of you.
And that's the difference between fraud. Fraud is an intentional act, right, of deception versus, if somebody's just making constant errors or they're doing waste or something. Can you just explain that really quickly for them?
Yeah, because unfortunately, it's not that easy. If it
Okay.
were, actually, it's full employment for lawyers. The fact that there is a lot of gray area in this. Under the False Claims Act, which is a federal statute, but there's in almost every state, there's a mirroring state statute. Uh, it doesn't take intent. And I think the reason for that is unless somebody admits what they did and why they did it, there's no way to get in their head and really understand intent. So the statutes actually read that reckless conduct is sufficient for proving liability under the False Claims Act. And that is both civil and criminal statute. So basically, the burying your head in the sand defense, the oh, gee, I didn't know, fails when it comes to trying to defend a False Claims Act case. If they can show a pattern that, in their opinion, shows that you've been reckless, i.e., just not doing your own audits, not reviewing your own documentation, not ensuring that your invoices and bills to the government are accurate, then they can say, yeah, that's enough for False Claims Act liability. And that comes with criminal penalties. It comes with treble damages, which means 3 times what you were overpaid by the program, and additional civil monetary penalties on top of that. So the damages between a mere mistake and paying back dollar for dollar and reckless or intentional conduct under the False Claims Act is huge.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, because you're right. Under the False Claims Act, it does say intentional, but how do you determine intent, right?
Yeah,
Um,
there's a separate statute that defines intent, and it includes reckless conduct. So it just
yeah.
really opens the door. And it kind of begs the question, what's reckless?
Mhm.
Well, that's subjective, any way you look at it. It boils down to whether or not the initial investigator liked you, right? If they thought you're a good person trying to do the right thing versus thought that maybe you weren't. Um, the attorney general is the next one that takes a stab at it. They have the authority to label something either civil or criminal or mistake or reckless. And then ultimately the jury, and how you come across to each one of those matters.
And does it help, moving on to, our last question, of best practices, does it help to have something in place or a technology or anything in place that shows that you are doing your due diligence, that you are reviewing your operations and flagging things, even just having automatic triggers that flag those things, that helps your case, right?
Absolutely. It takes it from reckless conduct to a mistake. Right? If you can show that you're being diligent in trying to bill and document correctly, that takes the wind out of their sails. It really, I can't say it strongly enough. It really is the difference. Showing that you've tried is what matters. That takes it from somebody that is ignoring the truth in order to be able to bill excessive mileage or bill for trips that didn't take place to somebody that's actively trying to prevent that. If you can show that, it goes a long way to helping you resolve your issues with the government.
Okay. All right, Chris, and just one last question for those who are, experiencing an audit or an investigation right now. Any tips for them, and how to navigate the space?
That's a great question. And I think that was in our poll. That was one of the questions in the poll. The old saying, we're from the government and we're here to help you. Uh, be cautious when you're talking with investigators. They won't always, believe it or not, be completely forthright and honest with you. So treat any investigation, any OIG or Medicaid fraud control unit investigator that shows up at your door as a potential threat. You should seek counsel, seek guidance, uh, be honest, be cooperative, but it's best to do that through counsel.
All right, thank you, Chris. That was great. We are going to just share some resources here. If you scan this QR code and you'd like to learn more about this topic, Chris actually shared this from the MFCU's, Medicaid Fraud Control Units. And this is your way to follow what the OIG and the MFCUs are doing. And then you can also review their resources there. It's quite a great tool and I think pretty easy to navigate. Other than that, if you would like to connect with Chris or one of the WMK team members, just scan the QR code and we'll also share his information via email following this. And then you could also connect with a Move AI representative if you need that kind of technology to help you. And so with that, we will jump into Q&A. And let us see here. Okay. So we have one question. Okay, sorry. All right. So the question is, can you expand a bit more on the fraud, waste, and abuse piece? What is the difference between waste, abuse, and fraud?
Yeah, that may have come in before we had that last discussion on the difference between reckless conduct and intentional. But that really is the barrier. If you make an occasional mistake, they'll consider that something that requires repayment. If you know you made mistakes and you try to hide that and not repay claims, they can take that just retaining money that you know you're not entitled to and turn that into intentional conduct. But as long as you're trying to do the right thing, you're repaying money when you know that there's been a mistake, then it's going to be pretty much dollar for dollar. But if you're reckless, that really is what takes it from just waste to abuse or fraud. When it comes to the Office of Inspector General, they have the ability to issue civil monetary penalties, which can be either 2 or 3 times the underlying amount at issue. So that's a pretty big bite. And we've seen cases where they just refuse to accept less than double damages. Um, if they think there's intent, they're probably going to look for at least 3 times, if not 3 times, and some jail time. So that's kind of the difference between fraud, waste, and abuse.
Okay. All right. And we have another question for if providing transportation service on behalf of an account, parentheses, job and family services, is it the account's responsibility to police their client's usage or the provider's or combination?
It's a good question. I'm really not sure what the arrangement details would be in that, but I think if you're the one ultimately in receipt of state or federal money, then you've got an obligation. We don't see the OIG allowing us to pass the buck very often. That includes when third parties are involved as billing agents or brokers. If you are the one that ended up with the money, they're going to see some responsibility on your part to make sure that that was actually earned. I hope that answers the question, but that's something that I think there's a good bit of misunderstanding about. But trust me, the investigators follow the money, and ultimately they're looking for repayment from the one whose pocket it ended up in. So if you're in receipt of federal or state money, you're responsible.
Yeah, Chris, and that also, brings up a point about, I remember not too long ago, Target, right? They had um, a third party contractor working for them, and and they were just an HVAC, but it was a cybersecurity issue on behalf of the HVAC company, and they were the ones that were held accountable, not the HVAC company. And so I know it's a bit different, but the point is that as we move forward, even with fraud, waste, and abuse, or anything like cybersecurity issues, these things kind of bleed into the NEMT space, especially when you're working with a lot of contractors. And if there is a consistent pattern of that, then it's like, are we actually policing our contractors the right way? And or are we just not doing any due diligence at all, and just saying, here you go, you come in, and then you're just off to do
Yeah,
whatever you want. So.
we get to wash our hands of it after we pass it off to somebody else, and yeah,
Yeah.
that's just not how it works. Um,
Yeah. Okay. And the next question is, should your business attorney be the counsel for these cases, or should you have a separate attorney for these potential issues?
yeah, I think that not to disparage, but uh, normal business attorneys, even county attorneys, state attorneys, they don't understand the nuances of healthcare law like an experienced healthcare attorney. We were talking a minute ago about how the kickback statute criminalizes things that in any other industry would be just good business. A lot of your business attorneys won't be familiar with those nuances in federal and state law. So, usually, in my experience, it's best to get an expert, even if they work through or with your local attorney, if you're comfortable with them. Um, you just you don't know what you don't know, and a lot of business attorneys just don't know. They just don't have the experience to see the pitfalls that somebody like me would catch.
All right. Okay. And that's it for our questions. So thank you, Chris. And thank you, NEMT audience. These sessions wouldn't be possible without your continued interest and support. And, we just greatly appreciate you all for showing up. And then, Chris, thank you so much. I think you have provided much clarity around a very complex and hot topic, and in such a short time. So kudos to you. It might be a record. But again, you will receive a follow-up email with link to access this webinar. And we're also sharing on the screen. You can scan that QR code to connect with Chris or one of his team members. And then this is an NEMT webinar series. And so our last of our series is with Jim Cermak from Diverge, who will be talking about choosing the right NEMT vehicle and which features matter the most based on your operations. So please feel free to scan the QR code there and get registered. That will be in 2 weeks, September 18th. So Chris, thank you so much. Hopefully you
Thanks for
got
having me.
something out of this as well.
Absolutely. It was fun.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks.